Hello and welcome back to the Daily Bible Summary, where the goal is to renew your mind as we read a new chapter every day and ask, what can I learn? Today's episode is entitled, Judah's Flawed Character. If you have read chapter 38, let's get started. Today we step away from Joseph's story to see what's happening with Judah, who came up with a plan to sell his brother to the Midianites and then conspired with the other brothers to deceive their father into thinking Joseph was dead. Let me offer an advisory before we begin. Some of the events in this chapter may not be appropriate for young ears. The chapter opens with the statement that, at that time, Judah went down from his brothers and turned aside to a certain Adulamite whose name was Hira. As we will see, Judah is not going to be painted in the best light in this chapter. First, we note that he went down from his brothers. This indicates a departure from the family. It appears that he became close friends with Hira, an Adulamite, and through these connections he met a Canaanite woman, the daughter of Shua. That he saw her and took her as a wife recalls the way in which Prince Shechem took Dinah in chapter 34. Now, we don't have to assume that this was non-consensual with Judah, but it does seem to indicate that Judah is acting on impulse rather than on a well-thought-out plan. Again, Judah is being painted here with a very flawed character. Judah and his wife have 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah, but the story becomes tragic. His oldest son, is so wicked that God kills him, and things are not looking so good for Judah's family. Now, one interesting detail is that while Judah took his wife on impulse, he arranged the wife for to marry. Her name was Tamar. Now, when God killed before he had any children, because he was so wicked, Judah commanded his second son, Onan, to take Tamar as his wife. Now, this was a custom that we refer to as levirate marriage, and it will be codified in the law of Moses. The purpose is to keep the dead man's lineage going. The first son of that union would be counted as the son of the deceased man. This would affect Onan, who would now receive the firstborn's inheritance. But if he produced children with Tamar, that firstborn son would be counted as heir and would receive the inheritance instead. I imagine greed might have had a part to play in Onan's decision to spill his seed on the ground rather than to fulfill his duty to his brother. More for me, in other words. So God killed him too. Judah did not want to risk losing his last son, so he sends Tamar back to her father's house until Shelah is old enough to marry her. Now, this may be a possible ruse on Judah's part, since this promise is not actually going to be fulfilled. Judah must feel there's enough doubt about Shelah's character that Judah fears he will die too if given to Tamar. Wow, I don't know what that says about the way he was raising his children, but it doesn't sound good. Now, the text does not give us a clear timeline, but enough time passes by for Judah's wife to die, for him to mourn her passing, and then, how shall I say it, get on with life? He goes up to Timnah to his sheep shearers along with his friend Hira. This is where things get interesting. Tamar is still a widow living in her father's house waiting for Shelah, and yet Judah has not given Shelah to her. So Tamar devises a plan to resolve the problem. When she hears that Judah's on his way up there, Tamar exchanges her widow's garments for clothing that would mark her as a prostitute. She veils her face to be unrecognizable to Judah and sits at the entrance of Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah, where Judah is sure to pass by. Now, why would she think that this would work? Is there something about Judah's customs and habits that would make this likely? I tend to think that she understood her father-in-law's character well enough to believe that this plan would succeed. So what does that say about Judah? Judah indeed does notice her, and they negotiate a price for her services. He promises to send a young goat from the flock, and to secure the promise, at her request, he gives her his signet, his cord, and his staff as collateral. Afterward, he sends his friend Hira back with the goat. But Hira is unable to find her because, she's left, and she's gone back home, changed back into her widow's garments, and waits. Rather than risk being laughed at, Judah lets the matter drop. He says, I sent the goat, so he feels justified. Meanwhile, the text does tell us that Tamar becomes pregnant by her father-in-law. 3 months later, others discover that Tamar is pregnant. Of course, everyone assumes that she's been immoral, that she's committed adultery with someone, so Judah declares, "Bring her out here and let her be burned." But as she's being brought out to be executed, she sends word to Judah with the items that he had given her as a pledge: his signet, his cord, and his staff. Imagine the surprise on everyone's face when she identifies the father of her baby as none other than Judah himself. It is Judah's statement, however, that we want to pay most attention to. He says, "She is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah." Judah publicly acknowledges his failure. Let me say that again. Judah publicly acknowledges his failure and Tamar's greater righteousness. And the text adds this important detail: he did not know her again. He never sleeps with her again. Here he shows restraint where there has been none before. Now, was this the transformative moment in Judah's life? The text does not actually tell us directly, but we see Judah acknowledging his wrong, recognizing Tamar's righteousness, and showing restraint going forward. Whether this was the singular turning point or part of a longer journey of change, we will see a very different Judah emerge in the chapters ahead. Tamar gives birth to 2 twins, and their birth is as interesting as the birth of Jacob and Esau. As Tamar is in labor, one baby's hand emerges first. The midwife quickly ties a scarlet thread on it, marking him as the firstborn, but then he withdraws his hand back in, and his brother breaks through ahead of him and is born first. They name him Perez, which means breach. Then his brother is born, still with the scarlet thread on his hand, and they named him Zerah. So Perez, who made the breach, is counted as the firstborn, and Zerah, whose hand emerged first with the scarlet thread, is the secondborn. So what can we learn from this chapter? I think that one thing that we can learn is about character, because character matters, and character can change. Moses pauses Joseph's story here to show Judah at his worst. We see him acting on impulse, departing from his family, withholding what is right from Tamar, and visiting prostitutes. His character is deeply flawed. He helped sell his brother Joseph into slavery, and then, along with his brothers, brought the bloody coat to his father, allowing Israel to believe his son was dead. That is the Judah of Genesis 38, selfish, deceptive, thinking only of himself and what he wants. But this is not the end of Judah's story. In the chapters ahead, we will see a very different man emerge. When Judah stands before his father, Israel, and receives the kingly blessing of Genesis 49, that the Messiah would come through his line, the prophecy that the scepter will not depart from Judah, he will become a transformed man. He will be a transformed man. He will have been a transformed man. What makes the difference? I think that it is Judah stops thinking of himself and starts thinking of others. That is the kind of change that God honors. God does not look for perfect people. He looks for people who care about others, who are willing to sacrifice for the vulnerable, who put their own needs, the needs of their brothers above their own comfort, who are willing to be humble. Judah's transformation shows us that our character today does not have to define our character tomorrow. Change is possible when we turn from selfishness to service. So here's some questions for you to think about. When you look at your own character, do you see areas where you are living selfishly rather than serving others? And are you willing to make the hard choices that lead to real change? Tomorrow, Lord willing, we will rejoin Joseph's story as we look at the problems he will face and how he handles them. As always, with each chapter, with each day, when we spend time in God's Word, we renew our minds.